Welcome to the Animal Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Medill. I'm the founder and CEO of Avenue, a digital marketing agency in Portland, Oregon, serving the animal, pet, and conservation industry. I created the Animal Marketing Podcast to help leaders and marketers think bigger about industry trends, marketing, and community and environmental impact. Each episode, expert guests from inside and outside of the animal, pet, and conservation industry will share their ideas about innovation. My goal is to provide listeners with actionable takeaways you can use to solve real problems and to grow your organization's positive impact in your community. So let's get started with today's show.
These next two episodes, we're collaborating on the podcast with Kim Van Syoc, Executive Director of the Banfield Foundation. During these unprecedented times, we thought it would be important and helpful to get an inside look at how animal nonprofit organizations nationwide are supporting people and pets. Kim, I'm going to pass this over to you and let you share what these next two episodes are going to be about.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I just want to start by saying how appreciative the Banfield Foundation is for your support and Avenue support in helping us raise awareness for some of the issues impacting the animal welfare industry. Given the COVID-19 situation, we have been hearing from our partners a lot about their pain points and about what pet owners are needing to keep pets in homes and not have to face potentially relinquishing them because of financial hardship. And so I'm really honored and I'm excited that we have the opportunity to speak with executive directors and leaders at some of the top nonprofits. There's I think so much that I know I can learn, and I hope that other shelters and pet lovers and advocates can learn from these organizations as well as they navigate and pivot operations in order to best support people and the pets they love during the COVID crisis. So thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to what we can accomplish together. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Stephen Hansen, President and CEO of Arizona Humane Society, and Brian August, COO of Oregon Humane Society. Arizona Humane Society takes in nearly 18,000 animals each year and plays a significant role in caring for the sick, injured, and homeless animals in the Phoenix metro area. And each year, the Oregon Humane Society adopts roughly 12,000 pets in the Portland metro area and performs nearly 13,000 surgeries. Nearly half of those are low-cost spay-neuter. In response to COVID-19, both shelters have had to make significant pivots in how they operate and how they are retaining and engaging their teams and still serving pet owners in each of the unique communities in which they're located. Personally, I am a huge fan of both organizations and both of these super inspiring leaders, and I cannot wait to get into our discussion. So welcome, Dr. Hansen and Brian. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to jump right in. At the Banfield Foundation, we recently surveyed 232 shelters about how they've been impacted by COVID-19. Universally, we heard donations are down, and in some cases as much as 50%. We know people are still being really generous in giving, but oftentimes to human healthcare services, which makes sense. However, can you share any financial impacts to your organizations, how you are dealing with reduced donations, whether financially or through goods, products, services, food? And if not through financial contributions, how can the public support you guys during this time?
So Kim, I can jump in and answer from the Arizona Humane Society's perspective, but you're absolutely right. People are still being incredibly generous, and many of us have so many things to be very grateful for. The Arizona Humane Society does anticipate up to about a 15% decrease in overall annual giving. It's our objective and our responsibility now to reach out and nurture relationships with our donors, tell them and show them how we're serving on the front lines for animals and pet owners in needs and share our urgent needs. We're making phone calls, we're doing Zoom meetings, we're doing all kinds of different communication routes to make sure that if people cannot give monetarily right now, that they do know that there are other ways that they can help animals. They can help through adoption, through foster, picking up injured animals and bringing them to our trauma center, or even sharing Arizona Humane Society posts on social media as an animal advocate. You can take many actions that have impact.
I love that. Brian.
I was going to say, I can echo what Steve is saying, and we're also anticipating a drop of anywhere from 8 to 12% over the year, and our projections change on a daily basis. But as Steve said, our donors have always responded when we need them the most, and this is that time. And we've seen some donors being able to step up and really show their commitment and really help us financially, and that's incredibly heartwarming to see. But one of the things that this has given us an opportunity to do is engage all of our staff in reaching out proactively and thanking donors and checking in on donors and saying, hey, you're a member of our community, and we want to make sure that you're okay during this, and just really strengthen that bond. And as Steve said, that's absolutely critical, is to make sure that you engage your donors and retain them, and just make them aware of the things that you are doing to try to continue to provide services to the community.
I couldn't agree more. At Banfield, we've been sort of saying it's important to still social distance, but not emotional distance. And I think reaching out to donors right now is really important, because sometimes it might be the only phone call or outreach that a lot of them get. And I love that you guys are still making a point to be personal and stay connected to those who really are your biggest supporters year round. Speaking of things that passionate pet owners or pet lovers do, fostering is one of those things. And I feel like fostering is having its own moment right now. I feel like it is like the new word in every conversation I have. And I would love to know what you all have done. I know both of you have actually changed your fostering and adoption processes and intake to respect social distancing. So if you could both speak to what your foster situation looks like, do you need any? You may not, and how you've really pivoted and what people should know about the current foster situation.
So from the Arizona Humane Society's perspective, I like to say that we're evolving on a minute-by-minute basis. So initially, we held a big adoption event sponsored by Bissell about 10 days ago, and very quickly adopted out almost 200 animals with very little forenotice or planning. We then consolidated our 4 major adoption locations into one of our major campuses. That adoptions process has evolved substantially in the last week. And we're taking adoptions now by appointment. We have about 450 applications right now to adopt. That will migrate to an online appointment process. You will interact virtually with an adoption counselor, and if there is a potential match, we will have somebody that will meet you at our South Mountain and our major Nina Mason Pulliam campus for Compassion, and make that adoption happen in a very thoughtful and cautious way. Now, foster has changed even more dramatically. Our waiting rooms are empty. We're doing everything by drive-through, as many other shelters are as well. If you check our website, the number of animals that show available are very few, because they are going out so quickly. The community has responded to fostering right now in an enormous way. We had a foster in our house, which we ended up adopting, no surprise, and that's happening in a lot of places right now. So we have only the number of people on site that we absolutely need to manage the animal flow. All the other processes are happening off-site.
Okay, I need to know about your foster fail a little bit more. It's good to know that those of us at Banfield are not the only ones who don't do that very well. So can you tell me, dog, cat?
So Mason he's a dog, and he's actually one of our cruelty cases. So our position in Maricopa County in Arizona is that we focus on sick, injured, and animals from cruelty cases. So that's why we operate a trauma hospital, which has moved to 24/7 right now. But Mason came in from a large cruelty hoarding case situation. He was a dog that had mites. We had some severe mange. The back half of him is still growing hair, and his ears are still growing hair back. And he's about 5 months old now. So he actually belongs to my daughter now, and she's home with us. She's a college student, and when she goes back to medical school, when they reopen again in July, she'll take Mason with her.
Well, similar to Steve, we've had to revamp our processes on the fly and continue to make sure that we were protecting our staff, our animals, and clients. One of the things we've had to do, which has hit across both adoption and fosters, is we have one physical site, and we had to make a really hard decision to ask our volunteers to not come in or tell our volunteers not to come in. And they were involved with adoptions and fosters, as well as areas across the shelter. And that, of course, puts strain on everyone because they do a tremendous amount for us. And like Steve, our fostering process changed to more of a drop-off pickup model right before the social distancing requirements went in Oregon. We did an initial push to get as many animals adopted out as we could before we went to foster. And we had a tremendous response from the community to that. Right now, we have about 237 animals in foster. As we are able to bring them back to go through our adoption process, we are doing that. In terms of our adoption process, same thing. 2 weeks ago, we went to an appointment only, and that for a week evolved almost every single day. And we are doing the same thing where by phone, our adoption counselors, we'll put a certain number of animals up on the site. People will put an application of that specific animal online, and then the next day our adoption counselors will call them to do almost a pre-meet and figure out good match here or not a good match, what would be a good match, and then set up a scheduled appointment once they've gone through that process to bring the person in to meet the animal. And so that's gone really well. We're not able to do the same number of adoptions, but we're able to do a decent amount and have come down with a pretty good scheduling system to use. And one of the most surprising things about it is going to this process, now when the person shows up, we have about a 90% success rate. So meaning before, you'd spend upwards of 45 minutes or so showing an animal, interacting with the person, or several animals. And sometimes there was an adoption and sometimes there was not. And now almost every time the person is walking away, with their new furry companion, like Steve did with Mason. Congratulations, by the way. There's a lot of process improvements that I think are going to carry over that are really going to help us as an organization, and probably animal welfare in general will look somewhat different on the other side of this.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm super encouraged to know that the match rate, if you will, if that's the right word, has actually improved, and that in situations like this, it's a good reminder that good can come out of things that feel bad while we're in the moment. So that's great. Certainly, given the non-essential order that's in place, can you both speak a bit, or at least start with Dr. Hansen, on how your teams are still meeting the needs of the pets in your community, the pets in your shelter? And you mentioned a bit ago about really caring for injured, neglected, abused animals. And I know you have a trauma hospital, and I'd love to hear about what you're doing through your trauma hospital as well as your full service vet clinic.
Yes, so Kim, we've made several changes at our medical locations. So we did close one of our clinics, which it was just focused on spay and neuter and vaccines. So that wellness care is temporarily on hold. We did expand our public full service veterinary hospital to 7 days. It's only taking appointments from people that have animals that have urgent care needs. So there's no general wellness, no basic care that's happening there at all. And that hospital is completely booked for at least the next week. So that's working nicely, trying to provide services to people that are finding themselves in financial hardship right now. We made several changes in the trauma hospital as well. In order to keep staff safe, to hopefully get in front of any COVID-19 cases within the hospital, we've divided up into teams. The hospital has shifted to a 24/7 format. And again, the trauma hospital is just treating unowned animals. So those are animals they can come over the counter. They call our pet resource call center. They're coming from various jurisdictions in the valley, an animal that is found that's been hit by a car, or quite commonly part of cruelty investigations like Mason and his case of severe mange. So we've divided up those teams to keep the teams completely separate. They are working 12-hour days. They're splitting the day. They're breaking in between and completely deep cleaning the hospital and not crossing paths, and running 24/7. So that allows less people in that hospital space. And as you recall, it's a rather tight space given the large flow of animals that comes through there. That trauma hospital treats, of the 18,000 animals that we take in, 12,000 of them actually go through the trauma hospital. So as with many, many other shelters, we see a very small number of animals that are ready to be adopted. They usually come in with severe issues, anything from fractured legs to crushed legs to cases of severe mange and everything in between. And right now we're well balanced. The number of animals coming in is well balanced by our foster and modified adoption processes. So we're in a position now to continue operating for a long time, almost indefinitely, but easily for the next few months if we need to.
I can't even imagine what it's like to take in pets that have received poor care or no care. Brian, I'd love for you to speak a bit about what Oregon Humane is doing from a medical perspective. And I would also love for you to speak a bit about, with medical services being down, what you are doing to continue to encourage engagement and development among your team. I know as a COO, you have a really passionate background and focus on developing people. You're a bit of a mentor to me personally, which I so appreciate. And so I would love to hear what you are doing on your front.
Thank you, Kim. That's nice of you to say. Our community service for our veterinarians and hospital staff are really focused around low-cost spay and neuter. And to respect the stay-at-home order and social distancing, we just couldn't figure out a way to continue to do that and keep our staff safe and keep our clients safe. So we had to make the painful decision, as many organizations across the country did, to suspend that aspect of our program. We still have 200 plus animals in foster. We still have animals coming in, and we're actually doing transport of animals from Oregon and Southwest Washington shelters. Since we have the space to be able to do adoptions while maintaining social distancing requirements, we can be a relief valve for them. Fairly frequently, they're asking for what's known as a request for medical intake, or an RMI. So our medical staff has kept busy and very closely with our operations staff to understand what might be coming in from other shelters around the state. Can we treat them? How can we help? And can we treat them in a way that maintains social distancing in our medical center? And that's always a challenge, because especially if you're doing more exam type things, do you need someone to restrain the animal? And then how do you maintain that space? So that is something that we're continuing to refine and wrestle with. In terms of the development, not just the medical staff, but across the organization, as we've had to have people work from home, or we've scaled back, our number of adoptions are less, so we need less customer care staff, and we have less animals in the shelter, so less animal care staff, or admission staff, or even our behavior and training staff. We've done a number of things to really try to support them and keep them engaged. As you might imagine, all year long, there are requirements for continuing education. There are training opportunities for fear-free sheltering or ASV guidelines. And so really what we did was decided to take a more structured approach to that, and created a process by which we have a group that was previously just doing marketing, now actually being the center point, so that when there are staff that have available hours, we can help them fill their hours through meaningful training opportunities, as well as other projects like contacting donors and thanking them. And once we get back to, I'll say, more normal operations, this will be really helpful in terms of some of their technical skills that they will have been able to accomplish during this time frame.
I have a favorite phrase that I heard earlier this year, and it's that a setback is merely preparation for a comeback. And so it feels a little bit like that's the case for both of the things that you guys are doing right now in the interim. Our survey that we talked about, or I talked about earlier in the segment, also showed that pet owners obviously are impacted by COVID. Certainly, we're hearing more and more about layoffs and folks losing their jobs, which is devastating. And we know that when that happens, often there's reduced personal capacity to care for their pets. Financial comes into play when it comes to providing veterinary care, food, and basic supplies. 68% of the shelters that we talked to mentioned that they received a huge incoming calls from pet owners saying, hey, I need help. I don't know if I can keep my pet. I don't want to relinquish my pet, but I'm in a bad financial situation. Can you both speak to this fact? Have you heard this? Are you hearing that calls are increasing or decreasing? Would love your point of view.
Certainly that is the case that we're seeing as well. Our call centers are now operating out of home offices, which was a pretty big feat for our IT department to pull off in very short order. So that those calls are coming in large numbers. And what we do is we find out what their issues are. If we can direct them to the full service hospital, provide them with an appointment, take care of their pet at a reduced rate, we do that. We recently hired a social worker. So we have a human social worker that's now part of our team. We call her a resource navigator. And her job is to try and help the other end of the leash, so to speak. So the call center is trying to get care for the animal. If the person needs care, we're providing information there as well and trying to make sure that package stays together if at all possible. So whatever sorts of problems that they are encountering, we're trying to find solutions to help them. And I think it's going to work well.
Brian?
We are hearing from pet owners somewhat similar to what we had before this, where whether it's cost of care or behavior issues, and really what we've been taking pains to do, as we were doing before, is to try to help keep the pet in the home. The other thing that we've been doing is for a pet food bank, we've been coordinating with some of the shelters in the Portland area. So for example, Multnomah County Animal Services has a pet food bank open in the public. And we're coordinating with them to make sure that, if they start to run low on food, we can open ours up. So really trying to look at geographically, can we be most effective with our resources for the whole community, and try not to act individually, but instead make sure that we are coordinating resources across the groups. One of the other things that we've done is we prepared our shelter to be able to temporarily board for people that are either COVID exposed or have to be treated or have to take care of someone, which is not something a shelter is normally set up to do, is to take in an animal from a person and then return it to them after an uncertain period. So we've really done a lot of contingency planning, set up not only space to make sure that we could follow any kind of intake protocols we need to if an animal has been in a COVID exposed household. And so far, we've only had, I think, about 4 animals come in with those circumstances where they're not surrendering the animal. They've been forced to go into care, but fully intend to reclaim their animal on the other side of that. And that's the thing that we fear, and we anticipate that there might be more need for that. And we just want to make sure we stay ready to do that.
Is that something that you will be able to continue offering over the next coming weeks if you see an uptick in the number of people that need care for their pets?
We can. I mean, our capacity is not unlimited, but certainly we're set up to do as much of that as we can. And we're coordinating also with the State Department of Agriculture and other agencies to understand how do we do this in a way that's humane. If there are opportunities to provide, say, a portable kennel to someone so that they can basically put their animal in a crate and keep it with them, does that provide an alternative? But absolutely, we'll do whatever is necessary to support the community.
Amazing. Thank you. So, Dr. Hansen, earlier you mentioned things are changing by the minute. Despite all the changes, what are you both most proud of right now when it comes to how your teams are operating, the services you're offering, and in general, how the community is responding?
Yeah, I'm really heartwarmed at the response from the community, especially along the foster lines. That is an enormous help. Financial support, supplies, that's all absolutely huge. But the ability of the staff to manage incredibly rapid change has been amazing. We were a little worried at first. We communicated on a daily basis to all staff and the board on what's changed in the last 24 hours. And we were a little bit concerned early on that they would see the rapid change as not a positive, as maybe we couldn't figure out what to do next. Instead, they're seeing that we are quickly modifying based on what's happening and with processes that people are coming up with. So many of these processes are ground up processes. There's a lot of sharing going on between shelters. So I'm not at all surprised that we hear a lot of very, very similar programs going between our two programs because shelters are talking to each other and we're listening to what other shelters are doing and doing well, and trying to take their ideas and modify them and share. So shelters are very good at doing that, and the resiliency of staff is incredible.
I'd echo what Steve said. I mean, spot on. The ability of our teams to really operate in an ambiguous, changing environment, I couldn't be prouder of how they've responded. And it feels like a lot of the development work. We've done a lot of EAS, or emergency animal sheltering, and FEMA training, and we've deployed a lot of people to disasters. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that, which I think a lot of the large organizations like us and Arizona Humane that are able to respond like that get the benefits of that in situations like this where it's hitting our own shelters. And that's really rewarding to see people really stepping up and rising up to the occasion, because typically situations like that, like what we're in now, can result in either people getting defensive, getting scared, kind of tearing each other down. And the other side of it is you can see people start to build each other up, to kind of cross over boundaries within the organization and really try to figure out, how do we solve this together? And all I've seen is the latter part, not just at OHS, but across country with organizations, and people not just kind of telling what we're doing, but just freely sharing, like, hey, here's a document we've used, feel free to modify, and or an SOP to how to do adoptions by appointment. And I love seeing that. And for me, it's led to changes over the last couple of weeks in the animal welfare world that probably would have taken years in a kind of normal environment where people are very slow to change. And this is, you got to innovate, or you're going to have some serious questions or concerns about what happens tomorrow. And so having that capacity to do that is just really rewarding.
Well, speaking of shelters, helping shelters, I'm throwing in a bonus question here. If you had one piece of advice for a shelter or rescue that isn't set up the way that your organizations are and need to be a little bit more scrappy and nimble, what would that golden nugget of advice be?
So I think from our perspective, the golden nugget is listen to your team members, let them come up with ideas, and don't be afraid to pilot. It's kind of a term we use all the time, which means we're going to try it and figure it out, and it's likely going to stick in some form. So engage everybody and let them know that we're all in this together. And at the end of the day, we want to come out with everybody healthy. We want to take care of the animals, and we want our teams to remain together. And it takes a lot of pressure off of the leadership when you realize that, in fact, we've got leaders all over the organization.
Couldn't agree more, Steve. And I'd add into that is staying calm, especially for a leader of an organization, even a small, scrappy one, is that ability to navigate and to make sure you kind of stay aware of your emotions and figure out where you need to go. Listening to others and realize everyone is going to experience this in different ways, and at different times during the day, they're going to be feeling different things. And you don't necessarily need to have all the answers. You won't have all the answers, but sometimes you just need to listen. And then, most important, I think we've found, is transparency and frequency of communication. You can't always share every detail that you're working on, depending on how confidential it is, but just coming to them and saying, I can't share everything, but this is what I can share, and as soon as I can share more, I will. And just doing that as often as you can. You really cannot over communicate, whether it's by email, by Zoom, in person, again, with the appropriate social distancing in place. But that's not a one-time thing. It is daily, just thinking about how do we get back in front of the teams and make sure there's no questions, or just see how they are doing and checking in.
Oh, that's actually great advice, not just for shelters, but for any of us that are in the business world. So thank you. Well, we've come to the last question, and it's safe to say that we can all use some good news. I certainly know I can, and I'm hoping that both of you can share a moment of hope or potential silver lining. Give us something to feel good about, please.
So, Kim, I'm going to share one that really warmed my heart. So we have a young man, his name is Tom, and I passed him in one of our trauma hospital wards a few days ago. And he stopped me because we had a dog that was really struggling in the shelter. He was a cruelty case. He wouldn't eat. He was petrified. He wouldn't even go to the bathroom. They tried and walk him. He was really having trouble. And Tom was trying to warm up to him. So we talked about it, and he sat with him for a while. And lo and behold, a couple of days later, I get a video clip of Tom playing his guitar to this little dog in the shelter, which is really something to see. So it's wonderful what people will do to try and raise the spirits of both the people and the animals.
I saw that video. It was amazing. If you are interested, go to Arizona Humane's Instagram handle and watch the video. It's spectacular. Brian.
I have a story about an adoption we did just a few days ago, but it's a gentleman named Harvey. And when he was talking on the phone with one of the counselors, Harvey's a bit elderly and he didn't have access. He didn't have a computer, didn't have access to email, but told this person the story. That he's a veteran, and his wife, Dorothy, and he were married for 45 years and had a cat they loved named Susie. And he lost his wife this past November to cancer, but having Susie helped him through that really, really tough time. Unfortunately, a few months ago, she ended up with cancer in her stomach and liver, and he had to put her down. So he said he just hasn't been able to sleep and was having a hard time with loneliness during the quarantine. So this counselor went online and started looking for cats for Harvey and finally found one and called him. The next day they showed the cat, this female cat named Genesis at the time, now since named Susie II, showed him the cat, and he picked up the cat in his arms and she started kneading biscuits and purring and just kneading his arm. And he said to her as he cried, "I'm never going to drop you." And he wrote us later and said, "OHS saved my life with this cat." And it's interesting because as you do adoptions, you wonder, like, we're always asking, is that an essential service? As we're sitting here in this and we're trying to lock down, but you ask someone like Harvey and we can't not do this. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, and the role that animals play in our lives, and that really brought it home in terms of how important this is for people.
I love Harvey and I love Susie II. Thank you both so much for being here, for taking time to chat about your pain points and your strengths and the good news that will hopefully come out of COVID once we are through it, hopefully sooner than later. Dr. Hansen and Brian, you guys have been just lovely to chat with as always. And for those of you listening, if you are interested in watching videos of somebody playing guitar for their shelter pets, you can find Arizona Humane on Instagram and on Facebook, and also at azhumane.org. And if you're interested in learning more about Oregon Humane, you can also find them on Facebook and on Instagram, as well as oregonhumane.org. So thank you both for being here. Keep up the phenomenal work helping pets and the people who love them. And I look forward to chatting with you both soon.
Kim, thank you so much.
And if you have any questions for the Banfield Foundation or want to learn more about what we do, how we support pets, and how you can support us, you can find us at banfieldfoundation.org, or you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. We would absolutely love to hear from you. So just a quick thank you again to Anna and Avenue for giving the Banfield Foundation the opportunity to take over this podcast. I'm personally so excited to help raise awareness for the different things that shelters across the country are experiencing, and finding out more how organizations like the Foundation and the pet-loving public can support them during this COVID crisis. So thank you again, Anna. Your support has been phenomenal.
Thank you to you, Kim. We are so happy to be supporting Banfield Foundation and shelters across the U.S. and just thrilled to be collaborating with you on this podcast series. You can also find Avenue online at avenueagency.com or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We'll see you on the next episode.